Let's move on to Emily Yates, a former Army journalist and current eventual ukulele superstar. Last week, we caught up with Emily in San Francisco and talked propaganda, veteran affairs, and hugs. Take a look.
Yeah, so I, like many Americans, was part of the economic draft. I joined the military because I wanted to go to school for journalism, actually, and I didn't have the money to do that, and so a recruiter happened to call me. Conveniently, got my number from the community college I was attending, which I think should be illegal, and he called me and asked me what I was studying, and I said, well, I want to be a journalist. I want to study journalism. And he's like, well, what if I told you I could get you a journalist job in the Army? And I was like, that sounds interesting. And he's like, we'll pay you like some dollars a year. And then you'll have money for school. And I thought, well, let's see. Let me look at the state I'm in right now and look at this as an opportunity for me to get job experience. It was shortly after 9/11. And so I was like, I'm going to be a war reporter, because I was 19 and I was kind of stupid. And, and I didn't realize that a journalist in the military is really just like an internal propagandist. It's because the other job title that goes along with print journalist in the Army is public affairs specialist.
Your PR, basically.
PR, Army PR. So that was so much not like being a war reporter. and I didn't end up deploying right away. I joined the military in 2002, and I didn't end up deploying until 2005. And so by the time I deployed to Iraq for the first time, I was well aware of the fact that my job was to make the war look good and to make it look like we were winning and to write stories that would boost the morale of, soldiers like me who were participating in it. So the funny thing is, though, in the military, if you're a military journalist, they want you to be kind of smart enough to spin the propaganda, but not so smart that you question why you're being asked to do that. And so I just got really disgruntled, and I was supposed to get out in June of 2007, and then I ended up being kept in for an extra year to deploy again under the stop-loss policy. So by the time I got out, it was a year after my original contract was supposed to be over, and I was a mess.
Obviously, you figured out what was going on while you had to report on what wasn't going on.
Mm-hmm.
How can you even spin that story without sounding like it's like you're just completely full of shit?
Well, you can't really do that. Basically, the way that we did it was we would focus on what Stephen Colbert calls truthiness, right? Like, okay, so the war is going really terribly, and we all know that. But why don't we focus on the heartwarming stories? Look, we're rebuilding a school, and the part that's left out is because we bombed it. And in fact, part of our job as public affairs folks was to go out with escort the media around the bases. So they would be embedded, and we would be their babysitters, and we would have to make sure they didn't talk to anybody who hadn't been prepared. So anytime you see, in the media interviews with soldiers from embedded reporters, you have to assume that the soldiers that they're talking to, these reporters, have been coached by their public affairs team to say, this is what we're doing, and this is how it's going. Because no reporters get to go out with a unit unless they're embedded that way anymore. It was a very smart thing that the military did when they were like, we're going to embed reporters rather than let reporters sort of do their own thing like reporters should do.
Right. So since you left the Army, did you then sort of in a sense of repentance, did you say, actually, this is what happened and this is what really went on? Have you been doing that since you left the Army?
Well, it took me a while to even figure out what was really going on. Like, I knew that we were not particularly welcome in Iraq because I could tell they were freaking bombing and mortaring our base all the time. And whenever we went out, it was dangerous. It wouldn't be dangerous if they really wanted us there. And And when I got out, I was angry with the military. I was ready to not have to think about the military for a while. And, I didn't even know enough about what was going on myself to be able to feel like I could really inform people on it. It wasn't until I went back to school a couple of years later and I decided to study the Middle East and actually learn about what was going on, learn about Iraq, learn about Afghanistan, learn about the entire Middle East, North Africa region and what U.S. interests have been there and, the history of the whole region and why there are all these warring factions. It's not just because they're primitive, right? Which was what it's not because they've been going at it for years, which was even something that I thought. It was, because of imperialism and because of colonialism, and we're just basically exacerbating that problem. So eventually I was able to see that, and working with Iraq Veterans Against the War was extremely educational for me because whereas before I just knew that I was opposed to this, as I got working with these other veterans and started educating myself, I realized exactly why I was opposed to it. And it didn't really help with the anger issues. It didn't really help me, feel like better when people would thank me for my service or things like that. But it made me feel better as a person for making the effort to figure it out. And it also came with a fair amount of guilt and sadness for having participated. So I feel like the reason why I work with IVAW now is because I feel like I owe it to myself and to the other people around me, especially to my, old battle buddies who, when we're all just kind of dealing with the problems that come from military service with depression and PTSD and suicide. Like people, I feel like as long as I'm healthy enough mentally and physically to keep doing this, keep learning about our foreign policy, learning about the military industrial complex, speaking out against the war, I feel like I have an obligation to do that because otherwise not many people are going to do it. And especially other veterans, it's it behooves us to stay brainwashed because as soon as we break free of the brainwashing, then we have to reconcile all of the hardness of reality and all of the internal conflict that comes with knowing that you were a pawn or knowing that you were, a tool or a cog, and that doesn't feel good. It feels really, really horrible.
And that's why, organizations like Iraq Veterans Against War, Veterans for Peace are so important because you have that community of people who know what it's like to be in that position. So final question, because this is airing on Veterans Day, what do you feel that people what do you feel that Veterans Day should be for, and how would you tell people the best way to thank a veteran, or what's the best thing to do on Veterans Day?
Thanks for asking that. Well, originally Veterans Day was Armistice Day, as you may know. And I feel like the best way to honor veterans on Veterans Day is by committing to work to not create more veterans. Whenever I hear the thank you for your service, I understand that it comes from a good place and a well-meaning place for a lot of people. But at the same time, I've experienced firsthand how it can be used as a dismissal of thank you for your service, now please move along. Right. And we don't want to hear about your post-traumatic stress or your military sexual trauma or the fact that you disagree with what you were asked to do or anything. We don't want to hear about that. Thank you for your service. Thank you. A woman actually did that. I was performing. Wow. I was performing in Flagstaff, Arizona, several months ago, and I mentioned into the microphone as some of my songs are inspired by my military service. And a woman at the bar, she was like, "Thank you for your service," and I was like, "Well, I appreciate you saying that, but or I appreciate your appreciation, but I really prefer to be thanked for the anti-war work I do now, because I don't think I was helping anybody while I was in the Army. And she actually looked at me, she was like, no, thank you. And then she and her friends proceeded to talk over all my songs that I played. So, I would ask people to not say thank you for your service, but to say welcome home, and to, offer a hug if one is wanted, or a handshake, or just an acknowledgement that life has not been easy. And also, I feel like we need to honor the veterans of our wars who are not American, the veterans, the Iraqi children who are growing up completely knowing only war, the Afghan children who are growing up knowing only war, the people who live in these places where we're waging these wars, they're involuntary veterans. These wars have accomplished so much harm for so many people, both at home and abroad. It boggles my mind that we're doing this to justify, that we're justifying this by saying, well, the terrorists killed Americans. Like, more Americans have died in these wars than died on 9/11. So I feel like if we're thanking each other on Veterans Day, we should be thanking each other for paying attention.
Well, awesome. So, welcome home. And and would you like a hug?
I would love a hug.
Okay. So there you go. That's what you can do on Veterans Day, everyone. For more information on Emily and her work, including her songs like Try Not to Be a Dick and the Foreign Policy folk song, visit EmilyYatesMusic.com. Also, if you're currently serving and want to learn more about your rights and options as a member of the military, check out GIRightsHotline.org.